So Nick, I want to talk to you about this interview with Lee McQueen, and it's an interesting one because this is where your role kind of changes and you stop just being an image maker and you do what I do, you become an interviewer and a journalist. Just give me the background for why you were interviewing Lee McQueen.
It was at the Hempel, which is a sort of modernist hotel, was a modernist hotel, designed I think by Barbara Halanuki, who did she did a series of hotels. This is one of them. This is very modern, clean, and all things minimal. Anyway, that's where it was situated. It was for ID magazine, I think, had asked us to do this. And it was strange because you're right, it was a new role for me, which I had no idea would be any good at or not. And it's sort of, essentially the offer is kind of, will you talk to Lee and you interview each other and talk about what you're doing, and rather than being interviewed by an interviewer. I've done lots of interviews over my career, and I always enjoy. I'm super happy to speak to people. I like doing that. I was slightly nervous of interviewing somebody else, and how I would ask the questions and what questions I should ask and all that sort of thing, whether I'd be any good at it. And also nervous about interviewing somebody who's my friend.
Yeah, and I guess in a way someone where, as we talked about in previous interviews, there's quite a lot of, I think the stuff between you and Lee, it was kind of happened automatically, it was just a connection that was there, and it was a lot of it rested on the unsaid, so I guess it's quite strange to then talk about that.
Yes, I think we were discovering our relationship in any case. You're right, a lot of it was on the unsaid, a lot of it was about a natural human affection between two people who weren't in the same sort of social spheres. As I said earlier, we didn't go out together. I wasn't his boyfriend. He wasn't my boyfriend. We weren't fraternising in that way, and we weren't seeing each other down a pub or a club. So we only really came together through our work, which to me was, if I could work 24 hours a day, the rest of my life I'd be super happy. The rest of the stuff is not. I don't like the social part of what I do, because it feels like I'm wasting time. So I want to create work. So I know I'm only on this planet for a little while, so I don't want to be at a party getting drunk. It's the worst thing for me. I want to be creating work. So our relationship was at the most important time, if you want. Our relationship was articulated itself through the photographs I did, and through the meetings we had, and through the talks and the desires we both had, and the images we wanted to see, etc., etc.
And why would you think why and were you being sort of recognised as collaborators at this stage? Do you think people have come, because there are these, you've mentioned your relationship with John and Yoji, and I think there are, throughout history, these brilliant relationships between designers and image makers, and do you think people were starting to see you as Lee's image maker at this point?
Always hard to know what other people saw. It was for ID magazine, so it's through Terry. Terry knows me and would know Lee. I think, yes, people must have acknowledged. I can't remember whether this was sparked off by some particular series of pictures we did. Maybe it was for Avignon. We did something for the French government for the celebration of the millennium, which is an angel's face made completely out of dyed maggots in a church in Avignon. So maybe it was sparked by that this piece was coming out, and they therefore asked us to do an interview. So I guess if people were aware we were working together.
And those relationships seems to be, they're relatively rare, I think, those kind of, you have photographers that regularly collaborate with brands on their advertising campaigns, but I don't think you get that many. We talked about it throughout a lot of the interviews we've done about this, but just the desire to work with him just because you found him creatively exciting and not produce work necessarily with an end in mind. Do you think those relationships are quite rare? Yes,
I do. I think I've only had a few of them in my life. I don't think you have that much emotional space in your life to have so many relationships. And also, having a relationship with Alexander McQueen and a relationship with John Galliano, that's a lot emotionally. I don't mean it's tiring. I mean it's so full. The worlds that you get shown, brilliantly overwhelming. And what else do you want, out of life? And so you only have a few of those relationships, and only space for a few of those relationships. That's why I never really worked for many brands. Or many designers, because you only find a few people who you fall in love with. There's lots of people who you kind of like, but the people you really fall in love with, the people who matter to you so much, there are only a few in your life, in all respects of your life. You tend to have.
When you say fall in love, what do you mean? Because is it fall in love with the person, or is it the work, or is it the vision, or is it?
I'm not sure I can quantify what falling in love means for you, Lou. I'd like to be able to try, but
it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's like it's not. You've said before, it's not quite friendship. It's more about the work and the process and the vision. So is it that you're kind of fall in love with? Sorry, it's incredibly hard.
It's a hard question to answer, but I'll try. yes, you fall in love with the vision. You fall in love with the. I mean, you fall in love with the person as well.
Yeah.
You know, there's been a few people in my life who, you know, I'm for all intents and purposes a straight man, but there's been a few men in my life who, you know, I've loved. Who you know, you just think they're fantastic and you want to work with them. And you know, John was one, Lee was another one.
Yeah.
You know, and they're people who you really, really care for.
Yeah.
You know? So, I mean, it's part of the reason I haven't spoken about Lee since his tragic death.
Yeah.
It's because I cry.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why I don't do it.
Yeah.
But I've started speaking about Lee now since the beginning of this year, partly because I get asked so many times to do so many interviews about Lee McQueen, about this and that. And when you have some incredible exhibition like Savage Beauty coming, which Sam Gainsbory's put together at the V&A, that's an amazing exhibition.
And it must, as much as it's, you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but as much as it's very hard, it must be amazing to see people, not fashion people respond to those clothes and, you know, queue through the night to see those clothes.
Absolutely, we can tell the power of those clothes.
Yeah.
But you know, there's been a lot of unpleasant things written, and there will be unpleasant things written. And I haven't ever read any of the books or anything else. And I don't indulge in any of that stuff. But I've been told there's been lots of pretty horrible things written. Yeah. And I thought, for a long time, I didn't want to speak about Lee. And I thought, it's too close, too personal. No, you know what? No.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, that's not fair. Yeah. That's not fair on him. You know, why should we? You know, we who knew him, you know, should actually say, well, he was this person. And I might be wrong. I might be misrepresenting him. But this is my honest truth. This is how I felt about the chap. And so I just think it's appropriate.
Yeah, and to talk about the work as well and his vision, because it's beautiful.
So that's why, sorry.
No, don't worry.
Tricky one to talk about.
Yeah.
This is why I haven't talked about it previously.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's an easy subject to talk about. But I think it's more appropriate to do that, and more appropriate to speak about him and not speak about him. So I'll get myself together a little bit.
Don't worry.
But I think it's more appropriate and more useful to say things, because they're not said out of any. I'm not trying to gain anything. I don't want anything from this, and it's my vision of him. Yeah. And it's a man I knew.
And also, as you said, he never shied away from the hard stuff.
No, so I don't think it's appropriate. And it's the same with, you did an interview, very good interview with Philip about Izzy, and he had the same sort of reaction. Excuse me. It's hard to talk about people you love about. It's hard to talk about people you love who have killed themselves. But I've made a very conscious decision this time to try and talk about his work and what he did and what he was, for me.
Yeah.
But it's just tricky. It's tricky because the whole thing of suicide is tricky. Because it leaves so many hurt people around you, so many people who can never heal that.
And I'm interested, it must make fashion seem like a harder place for you as well, because as you talked about, you love working with someone and you get so much out of it, but you are operating within a system that doesn't necessarily look after those people or reward them.
Yes, yes, but it's not really about that, Lou. Yes, the fashion system's pretty crap at looking after its own artists, and the big business is pretty harsh, but so what's new? Yeah. There's never been a time where business has been easy on people. There's countless, and just because Lee was somebody very well known, it got to the countless office workers that kill themselves in Japan, or it's the same pressure. It's the pressure of having to succeed and having to do things again and again. And some people it gets too much. But I think anyway. So let's get back to the interview, because I can probably do that without welling up. But the interview took place in this funny hotel. And speaking to Lee, you're speaking to somebody, and he was very, bless him, that's all pattering. He was absolutely unfrightened of saying what he thought. Yeah. So he would be talking about artists and other people within the world in quite harsh ways, which is not mine, quite diplomatic.
But he got very upset about criticism as well, didn't he? So that's kind of the irony of it.
Yes, he didn't like criticism. That's a natural human trait. It's much easier to criticise than to be criticised. Yeah. But it was quite a little difficult for me because I'm not, I'm quite diplomatic in what I say about people, not because I have any gain from not saying it, but he was very much, he would take people on and question. And I think it's from a sort of natural sort of desire to find out, why they were getting recognition when he didn't think their work was good. Yeah. But perhaps not the best way to explore that.
But that must have been quite it goes back to what we were saying about the honesty. He's quite a refreshing person to be around in terms of like ruffling feathers.
Yes, it is. I mean, it's refreshing in a selfish way.
Yeah.
It's refreshing because he doesn't do all the diplomacy and everything that most of us do most of the time. And to hear somebody who's saying, oh, their work's shit, and you know they should be doing this, is sort of refreshing. But that's another person he's talking about who has put all their heart and soul into their work.
But he did it, I think, in everything he did. You know, that famous show. I know it's a show you love. But you know, where the box falls down and he'd sat and he'd made fashion people stare at their own reflection like a mirrored box. You know, it's the same notion. It's mocking, but it's not with words.
I was never that sure how much he was aware of that brilliant moment. Yeah. And one can say he was completely aware of it or not. I just don't know. But that particular moment I thought was so brilliant. And if anything, over the whole of his career, that sort of was one of those moments you think, yes, that's amazing to have done that. Is to have, and just to explain to our audience a little bit, this was the Voss show, which was held inside, or the models were inside a glass box. But when we were waiting for the show to start, you're sitting on the front row, and literally 2 feet ahead of you is the glass of the glass box. And because all the lights are on in the room and not inside the box, it becomes a black mirror, and you're sitting looking at your own reflection. And to be honest, I could look at my own reflection for 10 seconds, 30 seconds, but after that, I'd rather look somewhere else.
You feel a bit weird.
And so then you look, your eyes drift, and all of a sudden you realise you're looking at Alexander Schulman's reflection. So your eyes are meeting her, so then you move, and it's Gwyneth Paltrow. And then after a while you end up just looking down at your own feet, because it's the safest place to look. So you're not sitting there looking at yourself in the reflection, and you're not looking at people either side of you. And that's what everybody did. Everybody sat there, and the shows in those days were quite easily an hour late. So the psychological process of sitting in front of your own reflection in a place on the front row of that catwalk, you end up staring, and the whole of the front row was bound to him until the lights went up inside the box. And then lights go down inside the house, lights go up inside the box, you can see in it, and then the roles are reversed. So then you become the voyeur, you become the eyes in the darkness, looking at these incredible creations who were purportedly in a mental asylum. So that's just genius.
But that's, I think, I thought a lot about that when I was reading and listening to this interview, because I think it's very easy to say that, to talk about him like he was this, all those awful patronising headlines where they say, East End boy done good, and and talk about him like he was this boisterous character. But actually, as much as he would sit there and, as he does, kind of say these quite naughty things, I think there's such an intelligence to how he unpicked people, and Voss, it's not a horrible thing to do to people necessarily, but it is in a way, and I think that's what's so clever, that he could do something so subtle. I just think he's so brilliant at that. And
it was a genius masterstroke, and as I say, I've no idea if he was aware of it or not. Sometimes he just did things because, and I'm not always sure that therefore takes it away from him, because we don't always understand the art we produce. We produce it instinctively. So whether that was a deliberate ploy or not, I don't know. Whether he was completely aware of what he was doing, I don't know. But it was certainly, I think, one of the most incredible bits of art I've ever seen.
Really. And tell me, I know it's kind of a hard question, but despite kind of everything that happened...
That's right, Lou. I've had a few hard questions.
All of mine have been a walk in the park. But despite kind of, his death and everything that happened, seeing this footage, I guess, going through, but also seeing the exhibition and looking at the imagery you produced together, you must be so proud of him, and I don't mean that in a patronising way.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nick.
My pleasure.